I never thought a simple arrangement could turn my life upside down. 2 words from my roommate, 1 smirk. 1 glance, and suddenly, my carefully structured world of logic, deadlines, and textbooks felt like it was crumbling under a tidal wave of confusion and desire. "Are you seriously staring at me again?" I snapped, my voice louder than intended, because I couldn't figure out how to breathe without thinking about the curve of his lips, the mischievous spark in his eyes. Ethan grinned, unbothered, leaning back against his side of the bunk bed. "I wasn't staring," he said, though the way his gaze lingered on me suggested otherwise. "Just observing." Observing. That one word made my chest tighten. Observing the way my hands trembled slightly as I tried to take notes. Observing the subtle way my eyes flicked to his whenever I thought he wasn't watching. Observing me. We had promised. Freshman housing had paired us by accident or fate, depending on who you asked, and we had laughed over the absurdity of it all. 2 strangers, agreeing to cohabitate for the semester without drama, without complications, just roommates. But it was impossible to remain strangers when every night the thin walls of our dorm carried the sound of laughter, sighs, and sometimes the quiet brushing of fingertips when passing a book or a bottle of water. Ethan was the kind of guy you couldn't forget. Tall, confident, and effortlessly magnetic, with dark hair that always seemed slightly messy, as if the wind itself adored him. His humor was sharp, a little teasing, but not cruel, and there was something in the curve of his smile that made me feel both challenged and strangely comforted. He had this ability to read people, to sense their boundaries and then ignore them just enough to make your heartbeat spike. On the other hand, had my walls, my neat folders, my labeled notebooks, my carefully charted schedules for classes, work, and socializing, everything in my life meticulously arranged to prevent chaos. Until Ethan arrived. And slowly, oh so slowly, he began dismantling my perfect little system. "Are you going to keep glaring at me? Or are you finally going to admit it?" His voice was playful, yet underlined with something else, a hint of sincerity I couldn't ignore. I froze. Admit what? That I had been staring at him while pretending to read. That I spent half my nights wondering what it would feel like to trace the line of his jaw with my fingers. Or that the first time he had smiled at me across the cafeteria, something inside me had flared, confusing, urgent, impossible to name. To him not. My voice faltered, betraying me completely. Ethan's grin widened, the kind that made him look like he already knew every secret I tried to hide. "You are," he said softly, leaning closer, the dim light of the lamp catching the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "And I don't hate it." That small confession, delivered like it was nothing more than a fact of the universe, sent a jolt through me. My heart, so carefully regulated, beat erratically, clashing with every rational thought I had about maintaining boundaries. We were roommates. Just roommates. Nothing more. That was the promise. But promises had a way of bending when desire whispered in the shadows. The semester had started with easy routines, shared meals, occasional jokes, quiet companionship, nights spent in separate corners of the room, headphones in, textbooks open. We had navigated the thin line between friendship and intimacy carefully. Until now. Until the way Ethan's eyes held mine tonight, teasing but unwavering, daring me to cross a line I had sworn not to approach. "You're impossible," I muttered, ducking my head and pretending to scribble notes. But I wasn't writing. My fingers hovered over the paper, poised yet frozen, because all I could think about was the curve of his lips, the tilt of his head, and the warmth radiating from him even through layers of fabric. Ethan chuckled, a low, rich sound that seemed to vibrate straight into my chest. "Maybe, but I'm your impossible now." That one statement, simple, unassuming, yet charged with everything unspoken between us made me want to scream, laugh, and cry all at once. My mind raced through scenarios, hypothetical touches, stolen glances, moments where our hands might brush as we reached for the same notebook, moments where casual laughter could dissolve into whispered confessions in the middle of the night. We had a system, a fragile understanding that kept everything under control. But control was a fragile illusion. And as I stole a glance at him now, silhouetted against the soft glow of the desk lamp, I realized how quickly that illusion was unraveling. Ethan had this way of leaning casually, yet every motion seemed deliberate. A brush of the shoulder against mine as he passed the desk. A lingering look when he caught me staring. Little things that felt accidental but carried the weight of intention. And the more I tried to resist, the more he seemed to notice, as if he thrived on the tension that twisted around us like an invisible thread. "I need water," I said suddenly, my voice steadier than I felt, and moved toward the mini-fridge, conscious of every step. My pulse hammered in my ears. Ethan didn't move from the bed, but his gaze followed me, unrelenting. "Do you want me to come with you?" His tone was casual, teasing, but beneath it, there was a current that made my stomach knot. I shook my head, too aware of how close he could be if he chose. "I'll manage," I said, gripping the fridge handle like it was a lifeline. But the truth was, I didn't want to manage. I wanted him. That desire, that unspoken craving, hung between us like smoke. Neither of us dared to act, yet neither could ignore it. It was a quiet storm, building in intensity, wrapping around every shared laugh, every accidental touch, every glance that lingered just a second too long. When I returned, water in hand, Ethan was sitting cross-legged on the bed, his expression softer now, almost unreadable. "You know," he said quietly, "we promised to keep this simple. Just roommates. But promises are tricky, aren't they?" I swallowed hard, unsure whether to respond. Simple. Nothing about this felt simple. Every shared glance, every casual brush of hands, carried a weight I wasn't prepared to shoulder. And yet, beneath the fear and confusion, there was a pull I couldn't deny. "Yeah," I murmured finally, settling back into my side of the bed, careful to maintain distance, though the very act of sitting so near made my pulse spike. "Tricky." Ethan's lips curved into that familiar smirk. "Good. Because tricky is kind of my specialty." And just like that, the room seemed to shrink, the air thickening with unspoken possibilities. The semester had begun as a promise of friendship, a careful agreement to avoid complications. But now, under the soft lamplight and the quiet hum of the city outside our window, it felt like the universe itself was conspiring to make us forget every rule, every boundary. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to retreat to my neat, controlled corner of life and pretend this was nothing. But my body betrayed me, leaning subtly toward him, responding to his gaze in ways I couldn't articulate. He noticed. Of course. Ethan always noticed. "Roommates. He said softly, more to himself than to me. Funny how that word can mean so many things. And just like that, my carefully constructed world, the one I had guarded with rigid schedules and labels, shattered into fragments of laughter, longing, and something dangerously close to love. I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew one thing. The promise of being just roommates was already a lie. And somewhere deep in my chest, a new, terrifying hope began to bloom. The next morning, the dorm hallways were alive with the usual chaos of students rushing to class, calling out greetings, and clattering the occasional locker door. I tried to bury myself in the routine, to pretend the events of last night hadn't left me tangled in thoughts I wasn't ready to name. But even as I poured cereal into a bowl in the shared kitchen, I I could feel Ethan's gaze on me. Not intrusive, not obvious, but there, lurking in every peripheral glance, teasing the edges of my consciousness. Caught him once, leaning casually against the counter, one eyebrow raised, a crooked grin plastered across his face as if he had just uncovered the most amusing secret in the world. My stomach flipped. The last thing I wanted was attention first thing in the morning. And yet, part of me impatient, reckless part hoped he would notice me. Hoping. That word alone made me feel guilty. "Hey," he said casually, breaking the silence as if he had just remembered my existence. "Sleep okay?" I hesitated, gripping my spoon tighter than necessary. "Yeah, fine," I muttered, keeping my eyes on the cereal. My voice sounded absurd even to my own ears, too shaky for the calm tone I had intended. "Just fine," he pressed, stepping closer. The smell of his cologne, or maybe just him, hit me, subtle but intoxicating. I wanted to back away, but I didn't. Something magnetic about him always held me in place. I said fine. I repeated, a little louder this time. Ethan smirked, obviously enjoying my flustered state. Sure." He didn't push further. Not now. Not yet. Instead, he leaned against the counter casually, arms crossed, looking at me with an expression that was part amusement, part curiosity. It was impossible not to notice the quiet tension building between us, a current stronger than words could describe. Every movement, every glance, every shared space felt loaded with potential. I tried to distract myself with breakfast, with my phone, anything, but Ethan had a way of infiltrating my focus without even trying. Later that day, we had a shared lecture in American history, sitting side by side in the crowded hall. I couldn't ignore the way his shoulder occasionally brushed mine, each contact sending an almost imperceptible shiver down my spine. I caught him looking at me several times, those mischievous brown eyes hiding intentions I didn't dare interpret yet. "Stop spacing out," he whispered when I drifted too far in thought, just loud enough for me to hear. His lips brushed my ear, deliberate, and I had to bite my lip to stop the involuntary reaction. I could feel my cheeks burning. "I'm not spacing out," I whispered back, though the truth was obvious. My mind was a storm of what-ifs and dangerous desires. Ethan chuckled softly, the sound vibrating faintly in the air between us. "Sure you aren't," he said, his tone teasing yet warm. And with that, he leaned back slightly, pretending nothing had happened. It was exhausting, this constant tug-of-war. Part of me wanted to retreat, to remind myself of boundaries. But another part, the part that had been silently waiting for months, throbbed with anticipation every time we exchanged glances or brushed shoulders. By the time the lecture ended, I was both frazzled and oddly elated. We walked out together, shoving through the crowded hallways. Our proximity was close, casual at first, but the heat between us was undeniable. I could feel it in the brush of his arm against mine, in the subtle, almost unconscious way he leaned just slightly toward me as we navigated the crowd. "So," Ethan began, breaking the comfortable silence, "wanna hit the library before dinner?" I paused, my heart racing at the mere thought of spending more time with him. Yeah. Sure," I replied, forcing calm into my voice. But inside, I was anything but calm. The idea of sitting across from him, pretending to study while my thoughts were entirely consumed by him, made my chest tighten in a way that was equal parts painful and thrilling. The library was quiet, almost sacred in its stillness. We found a corner table, far enough from other students to feel private, close enough that our knees brushed under the table. The contact was subtle, accidental, yet charged. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every brush of skin against skin felt deliberate, electric. We opened our textbooks and notebooks, pretending to focus. But it wasn't long before Ethan leaned over, ostensibly to point at a passage. His hand brushed mine again. Accidentally, of course, and I felt my breath hitch. "You okay?" he asked softly, though the teasing edge of his tone remained. I nodded, too aware of how my pulse betrayed me. "Yeah, I'm fine." He smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made my stomach flutter. "You sure about that?" Before I could respond, his hand lingered slightly longer than necessary, fingers almost brushing mine. The air between us thickened. It was absurd. How a simple touch could make everything else disappear: the textbooks, the quiet library, the mundane world outside. All that existed was the tiny circle of tension and warmth between us. "Stop it," I whispered finally, though my voice was barely audible. "Stop what?" he asked innocently, though the smirk tugging at his lips suggested he knew exactly what he was doing. "You know," I trailed off, my face burning. I couldn't find the words to explain the way my body and mind reacted to him. It was frustrating, exhilarating, terrifying all at once. Ethan leaned back, his expression softening just slightly. "I think I do," he said quietly. Then, almost imperceptibly, he brushed his thumb against mine. Just a brush, but it felt like a spark had ignited inside me. I had to look away. The library suddenly felt too small, too intense, too intimate. I buried my face in my notebook, trying to steady my racing heart. Ethan leaned back in his chair, giving me a moment, but I knew he was watching. I could feel his eyes, patient yet teasing, tracing my every movement. The afternoon bled into evening, and before we knew it, the library was closing. We packed up our things, moving slowly, lingering in the silence of the deserted stacks. Outside, the campus lights twinkled in the dusk, painting everything in gold and soft shadows. "Walk you back?" Ethan asked, a casual offer, but there was an undercurrent I couldn't ignore. I nodded, unable to speak, and we walked side by side, shoulders brushing more than usual. My heart raced with every step, every accidental contact, every fleeting glance. The air was thick with tension, unspoken words, and the magnetic pull of something we both knew was inevitable. By the time we reached our dorm, the sky had darkened, the stars beginning to pierce the night with faint glimmers. Ethan stopped at the doorway, turning to face me fully. "You know," he began softly, "we promised to just be roommates. But promises are tricky, aren't they?" I could only nod, my throat tight, my pulse echoing in my ears. I wanted to say so much, to confess everything I felt, everything I desired. But words failed me, and I was grateful for the silence, for the way his gaze said everything words couldn't. He stepped closer, and for a moment, the world shrank to just the two of us, standing in the quiet dorm hallway, our proximity both thrilling and terrifying. The air between us was heavy with possibility, with unspoken confessions, with the silent acknowledgement that the rules we had set were already fading. Then, just as suddenly, he leaned back, a mischievous grin lighting up his face. "See you in the morning, roomie," he said casually, though I could detect the subtle promise hidden in the simplicity of the words. I watched him go, heart still racing, body still tingling from the small, deliberate closeness we had shared. I didn't know what the future held, didn't know how we would navigate this delicate, dangerous line between friendship and something more. But I knew one thing: nothing would ever be simple again. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't want it to be. That night, lying in my bed, I replayed every moment, every glance, every touch. The way his eyes had lingered, the curve of his lips, the subtle warmth of his presence. My mind wandered to forbidden places, to thoughts I had never allowed myself to entertain. And in the quiet, I realized something terrifyingly exhilarating. I was falling for him. Falling. And already completely lost. The next week passed in a haze of routine. But nothing felt routine anymore. Every glance from Ethan, every accidental brush of his hand against mine, sent tremors through me I could not control. Classes, homework, even the cafeteria, all of it had become a stage where every action between us carried double meaning. And somehow, neither of us could or wanted to break the tension that had settled so comfortably between us. It was a Wednesday evening when the semester's first group project forced us to spend hours together in the dorm room. Normally, I would have retreated into my own space, headphones on, pretending the world didn't exist. But now, Ethan was there, sprawled across the bed with his laptop, giving off that infuriating aura of effortless charm and confidence. "You're quiet," he said, looking up from his screen, his eyes teasing. "Usually, you're muttering to yourself about some pointless fact no one cares about." I rolled my eyes, trying to appear annoyed, but my heart betrayed me. "Maybe I'm just observing," I said, deliberately echoing his words from last week. Ethan laughed, a rich, low sound that made my chest ache. "Observing? Sounds suspiciously like stalking," he said, leaning back and crossing his arms. I groaned, hiding my face in my hands. "You are impossible." "Yeah," he said softly, leaning closer. "But I'm your impossible." The air between us seemed to crackle. I tried to focus on the project, on the slides and research, but Ethan had a way of drawing me in with just the tilt of his head or a fleeting smile. My thoughts kept wandering to the warmth of his shoulder, the subtle scent that seemed uniquely his, the soft brush of his fingers when he adjusted a page in his notebook. Hours passed, and the room grew dim as the sun set outside the window. We had moved closer across the table without realizing it, our knees brushing under the surface. I felt the tension in the air, thick and magnetic, daring me to look up, daring me to act. "You know," Ethan began, his voice soft now, almost vulnerable. "We don't have to pretend, about anything." I swallowed hard, not sure if I was ready to confront my own feelings. My chest ached with a combination of fear and desire. "Pretend what?" I asked cautiously, my voice barely above a whisper. He leaned a little closer, so close that I could feel the heat radiating from him. "About us," he said simply, I searching mine. "About this tension. About the fact that you're thinking about me more than you'd like to admit." My heart stuttered. The room felt smaller, warmer, and the air was charged with something we had both been dancing around for weeks. I could feel the pull between us, magnetic and irresistible, and I realized I didn't want to resist anymore. Before I could respond, he leaned just a fraction closer, and our knees pressed together under the table. My stomach flipped. My mind screamed at me to stop, to maintain boundaries, but my body betrayed me, leaning slightly toward him, drawn like a moth to a flame. "You're killing me," he whispered, his lips just inches from mine, his warm breath brushing my cheek. "Do you feel it too? Or is it just me?" I couldn't answer. Words failed me completely. All I could do was nod slightly, my breath catching in my throat. Ethan smiled, a slow, victorious grin that made my heart pound even faster. "Good," he murmured, his hand brushing mine deliberately this time. The touch was light, teasing, but it carried a weight that made my pulse spike. Time seemed to stretch and warp around us. The project, the world outside, all disappeared. There was only this moment, This magnetic tension. This dangerous closeness that we both acknowledged but hadn't yet crossed. As if sensing my hesitation, Ethan leaned back slightly, giving me space but not retreating entirely. "We don't have to rush," he said softly. "We've got time. But I don't want to pretend we're just roommates anymore." My chest tightened. I wanted to speak, to confess, to reach out and close the gap between us. But I couldn't find the words. Instead, I nodded, letting my gaze lock with his. There was an unspoken understanding, a silent agreement that whatever this was, it was already more than friendship. The following days were a delicate dance. Every interaction was charged, every glance loaded with meaning. We studied together in silence, shared meals with subtle touches, and lingered in hallways longer than necessary. The tension between us was both thrilling and terrifying. One evening, we found ourselves alone in the dorm lounge, the rest of the building quiet. Ethan leaned back on the couch, feet on the coffee table, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Do you realize how unfair you are?" he asked casually. I raised an eyebrow, unsure what he meant. "Unfair how?" He smirked, leaning forward slightly. "Unfair that you make me want things I'm not supposed to want. That you make me think about you every second of the day." My breath hitched. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, my chest tightening. I don't know what you mean," I said, though my voice betrayed me. He chuckled softly, a sound that resonated in the quiet room. "Don't lie to me," he whispered, leaning closer, until our faces were just inches apart. "I can feel it. You want this too. You've been pretending, but I see it in the way you look at me." I swallowed hard, unable to deny it any longer. My heart raced, my hands trembled slightly, and I realized that I didn't want to deny it. Not anymore. Ethan's gaze softened, losing some of its playful edge. "It's okay," he murmured. "You don't have to hide it from me. I feel the same way." My chest tightened with a mixture of relief and longing. I wanted to close the distance, to bridge the space between us, but fear and hesitation held me back. Ethan, however, seemed to sense it, and slowly, deliberately, he reached out, his hand brushing mine. The contact was light, tentative, but it sent a jolt through me that I couldn't ignore. "Come closer," he whispered, his voice low and inviting. I hesitated for a moment, then, drawn by an irresistible force, I leaned forward slightly, closing the gap. Our hands intertwined almost naturally, fingers sliding together, warmth spreading through me in waves. The simple act of holding hands felt monumental, a declaration of something unspoken but undeniable. Ethan's lips curved into a soft, reassuring smile. "See, not so scary," he murmured. "Feels right, doesn't it?" I nodded, unable to speak, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. The fear, the tension, the uncertainty, all of it melted away in that moment, replaced by something tender and electric. We stayed like that for a long time, hands intertwined, foreheads almost touching, breathing in the quiet intimacy of shared space and shared feelings. It was a silent affirmation, promise without words, that whatever came next, we would face it together. Eventually, the quiet was broken by a soft sigh from Ethan. "You know," he said, still holding my hand, "I've been waiting for this, for you, for us, and I don't want to waste any more time pretending." I finally found my voice, soft but steady. "Me too." That simple confession hung in the air, heavy with meaning. It was the first step toward something neither of us could have predicted when we first moved in as strangers, promising to just be roommates. The following days were a blur of stolen moments and quiet discoveries. Every touch, every glance, every brush of skin against skin carried weight and warmth. We learned each other's rhythms. The small habits that made us laugh or sigh. The little quirks that made us human. One evening, as we lay on our respective beds, talking quietly after a long day, Ethan shifted closer, his arm brushing mine. You know, he whispered, I don't think I've ever been this connected to anyone before. I turned to face him, my heart swelling. Me neither. I admitted. It's intense, but good. He smiled softly, a warmth in his eyes that made me feel safe despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. Good, he echoed, then added teasingly. But don't think you can escape all my teasing now. I laughed, a genuine, light sound that seemed to dissolve the tension we had carried for so long. I wouldn't want to, I said. Not with you. For the first time since the semester began, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could be something real, something worth taking risks for, something that went beyond the fragile rules and boundaries we had set at the beginning. And as Ethan leaned closer, the faintest hint of a smirk on his lips, I realized that the promise of being just roommates was long gone. In its place was something infinitely more thrilling, infinitely more terrifying, and infinitely more beautiful. The weekend arrived with a rare calm over campus, the air crisp with early autumn and the sunlight warm against our skin. It was Saturday, and the dorm was unusually quiet. Most students had gone home or to weekend trips, leaving the hallways and common areas nearly deserted. Ethan and I found ourselves alone for the first time without distractions, an intimacy that was thrilling and slightly terrifying all at once. We had decided to spend the day doing absolutely nothing. No classes, no assignments, just the two of us in our little dorm room. The promise of solitude was seductive, and yet the weight of our emotions lingered between us like a tangible presence. I couldn't sit still for long, my mind constantly replaying the last week's moments, the brush of his hand, the stolen glances, the quiet conversations that had felt like confessions in code. Ethan noticed. Of course. You're restless, he said, tilting his head, a teasing smile on his lips as he lounged on his bed. You've been fidgeting since we woke up. I'm not, I replied, though my tone betrayed me. I could feel my pulse quicken, betraying the excitement and tension I couldn't suppress. He raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. Aha. Sure. You just can't sit still because you're thinking too much about me. My face heated instantly, and I turned away, pretending to busy myself with a notebook I wasn't really reading. Stop it, I muttered, though there was no real force behind my words. Ethan chuckled softly and slid off his bed, moving toward me with that easy, confident grace that made my heart hammer in my chest. Thinking too much about me isn't a bad thing, he said, standing close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him. It's flattering, actually. I swallowed hard. The words were teasing, but the undertone was sincere, and it made it impossible to look anywhere but him. Every instinct told me to pull back, to maintain the boundaries we had carefully skirted. But another part, the reckless, impulsive part one had been trying to ignore, urged me closer. Flattering, I repeated, my voice a whisper. He nodded, his expression softening. I searching mine. Yeah, but also, dangerous. Dangerous, I echoed, my heart lurching. Because I want you, he admitted quietly, the words a stark contrast to the playful tone he usually used. And I don't want to hide it anymore. Not from you. Not from myself. The confession hit me like a jolt of electricity. My chest tightened, my pulse spiked, and the walls I had built around my carefully structured world crumbled further. I wanted to step back, to maintain the illusion of control. But my body betrayed me, leaning slightly toward him, drawn like a magnet to the intensity in his gaze. You really mean that? I whispered, barely daring to breathe. He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips, eyes warm and unwavering. I've never been more serious about anything, he said softly. Not school, not friends, not anything, just thesis. I felt a lump form in my throat, a mix of fear and longing. I feel the same, I admitted, the words trembling from my lips. But what if this changes everything? Ethan stepped closer, closing the last bit of distance between us. It already has, he murmured, his hand reaching up to brush a strand of hair from my face. His touch was gentle, almost reverent, and I felt a shiver run through me. And that's okay. We'll figure it out, together. The sincerity in his eyes, the warmth of his hand, the soft gravity of his present seat all overwhelmed me. I wanted to tell him everything, to confess the days I had spent thinking about him, dreaming about him, yearning for him, but words failed me. Instead, I let my hand find his, fingers intertwining naturally, the simple connection grounding me in a way I hadn't realized I needed. We spent the day like that, talking, laughing, teasing, occasionally leaning closer than socially acceptable, hands brushing, knees pressing lightly together. Each moment was charged with a delicate tension, a mixture of desire, affection, and the unspoken acknowledgement that the boundaries we had once promised to uphold no longer applied. By late afternoon, the sun had begun to dip low, casting golden light through the window. Ethan and I found ourselves sitting on the floor, backs against the bed, legs intertwined. The air was thick with quiet anticipation, the kind that made every touch and glance feel electric. You know, he began softly, his head resting lightly against mine. I've been thinking about that night in the library. I felt my pulse quicken. What about it? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He smiled faintly, a mischievous glint returning to his eyes. About how close we were, how obvious it was that we both wanted more but were too stubborn to admit it. I swallowed hard, my hands tightening around his. Yeah, I remember. Good, he murmured, lifting my hand to press a gentle kiss to my knuckles. The warmth of his lips sent a shock through me, and I had to close my eyes to maintain composure. Because I want more, and I think you do too. I opened my eyes slowly, meeting his gaze, and realized that I did. I wanted him closer, closer than we had ever been before. Every teasing glance, every brush of skin, every shared moment had led to this point. And I was ready. Ethan leaned in, slow, deliberate, giving me time to pull back if I wanted. But I didn't. I let him close the gap, our lips almost touching, the tension unbearable. And then, finally, he kissed me softly at first, tentative, testing the waters, before deepening as I responded, my hands moving to rest on his shoulders, feeling the solid warmth of him against me. The kiss was electric, a collision of months of suppressed longing, uncertainty, and desire. I felt his fingers thread through my hair, pulling me closer, and I couldn't help but melt into him. Every worry, every hesitation vanished in the simplicity of that connection, replaced by a raw, undeniable emotion that neither of us could ignore. When we finally pulled back, breathless, our foreheads resting together, Ethan whispered, "You have no idea how long I've wanted that." I laughed softly, the sound a mixture of relief and joy. I think I have some idea now. We spent the evening like that, talking, laughing, holding each other, exploring the newfound intimacy that had been waiting quietly beneath our teasing glances and subtle touches. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only the two of us, learning the rhythm of each other's hearts, discovering the boundaries and freedoms of our connection. Yet, even in the bliss of this new closeness, I couldn't ignore the creeping worry in the back of my mind. What about school? Friends? The delicate balance of our lives. What if one misstep shattered everything we had finally admitted? Ethan seemed to sense my thoughts. "Hey," he said softly, brushing a thumb across my cheek. "Whatever happens, we'll face it. Together. That's what matters." His words were a balm, a reassurance that even in uncertainty, we were not alone. I leaned into him, letting the tension of the past weeks melt away in the warmth of his embrace. For the first time, I felt truly seen, truly understood, and completely alive. The night stretched on, the quiet dorm room filled with soft laughter, whispered confessions, and the gentle rhythm of two hearts learning to beat in sync. And as I drifted into a sleep filled with warmth and hope, I realized that the promise of being just roommates had transformed into something infinitely more profound. Something worth every risk, every heartbeat, every moment of vulnerability. The following week brought with it a subtle tension neither of us could ignore. The sweetness of our newfound intimacy had begun to mingle with the weight of reality classes, assignments, friends, and the unspoken question of what this all meant. It was one thing to steal kisses in the dorm, to linger in quiet moments together, and entirely another to navigate the complex landscape of emotions, expectations, and the delicate balance of our lives as students. Ethan seemed unusually quiet that Monday morning, a shadow behind his usual mischievous grin. We sat together in the cafeteria, the hum of chatter and clinking silverware filling the space around us. Yet an invisible wall had appeared between us. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my scrambled eggs, but the tension was palpable. "Something's up," I said finally, breaking the silence, my voice careful. Ethan looked up, his dark eyes meeting mine, and I saw the vulnerability lurking there, a rare glimpse beneath his confident exterior. I don't know," he admitted. "I guess I'm just thinking about how complicated this all is." "Complicated?" I echoed, my heart tightening. "You mean?" He nodded, running a hand through his messy hair. "Yeah. I want you, God. I do, but what if we mess everything up? What if we hurt each other or someone else finds out and changes things?" I felt my stomach churn. The fear he voiced was one I had tried to bury, the one that whispered in the quiet moments. What if this was too much? Too fast? What if the fantasy of intimacy collided with the reality of our lives and shattered everything? "I get it," I said softly, reaching across the table, letting my hand brush his. "I worry about that too." He gave a faint smile, squeezing my hand lightly. But at the same time, his voice trailed off, and I waited, heart pounding. "I know," I said gently, encouraging him to continue. "I don't want to stop." He admitted finally, his gaze unwavering. "Not after everything we've shared. Not after feeling this." I felt a lump in my throat, emotions flooding in. "Me neither," I whispered, my voice trembling with the weight of truth. We sat in silence for a long moment, hands intertwined, both of us aware of the delicate line we were walking. The world outside the cafeteria continued on, oblivious to the storm brewing in our little bubble. That night, the tension followed us back to the dorm. We tried to study together, but our focus kept breaking under the weight of unspoken thoughts and lingering glances. I caught Ethan staring at me more than once, and every time, my pulse quickened, my thoughts spinning out of control. Finally, unable to bear it any longer. I set my books aside. We need to talk, I said, voice firm yet unsteady. Ethan looked up, eyebrows raised, a faint smirk tugging at his lips despite the seriousness in his eyes. About what? About this, I said, gesturing vaguely between us, my heart pounding. About us. About everything. He leaned back, exhaling slowly, as if preparing himself for a conversation he had been avoiding. Okay, he said finally. Let's do it. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. I care about you, I admitted, the words spilling out in a rush. More than I should. Maybe. More than I thought I could. And I don't want to lose what we have. But I'm scared. Scared that it's all going to fall apart. Ethan's expression softened, and he reached out to take my hand, his touch grounding me. I'm scared too, he admitted. But I think the only way we're going to figure this out is to be honest with each other. About what we feel, what we want, and what we're willing to risk. I nodded, feeling a weight lift slightly from my chest. Okay, I whispered. I'm willing to try. With you. He smiled, a mixture of relief and affection in his eyes. Good, he said softly, because I don't want to do this with anyone else. The conversation marked a turning point. We began to navigate our relationship with more openness, acknowledging our fears and desires, learning to communicate in ways we hadn't before. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, jealousy, and insecurity, but we faced them together, slowly building trust and intimacy. One evening, a week later, we found ourselves alone in the dorm lounge again. The room was quiet, the soft glow of the lamp casting shadows that danced across the walls. Ethan sat on the couch, and I settled beside him, our legs brushing lightly. You know, he said softly, I've been thinking a lot about how quickly everything changed. I looked at him, heart tightening. Yeah, he said, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear. And how much I care about you. More than I ever thought I could care about anyone. My chest swelled with emotion, and I leaned closer, resting my head against his shoulder. I care about you too, I murmured, closing my eyes and savoring the warmth of him. We stayed like that for a long time, simply enjoying the closeness, the quiet intimacy that had become our sanctuary. But the tranquility was broken when Ethan pulled back slightly, his expression serious. I have to tell you something, he said, voice low. I felt a pang of worry. What is it? He took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. It's about my past, my family, things I haven't told anyone. I reached out, placing a hand on his arm. You can tell me, I said softly. I want to know. I want to understand. Ethan's eyes softened, and he nodded. Okay, I will. But it's complicated, and I'm afraid you might judge me. Hey, I said gently, cupping his face in my hands. There's nothing you could tell me that would change how I feel. Not now. Not ever. He exhaled, a mixture of relief and vulnerability. All right, he said finally. I come from a family that doesn't exactly accept people like me. I've had to hide a lot, pretend to be someone I'm not. And I was afraid that if anyone found out, it would ruin everything. I felt a surge of empathy and protectiveness. Ethan, I whispered, squeezing his hands. You don't have to hide from me. I'm not going anywhere. I don't care about what other people think. Care about you. His eyes glistened with unshed tears, and he pulled me into a tight embrace. Thank you. He murmured into my hair. I've never felt this safe with anyone. The vulnerability between us deepened our bond, creating a layer of trust and intimacy that went beyond physical closeness. We began to share more openly our fears, our hopes, our dreams, and the quiet insecurities we had kept hidden from the world. But even in this newfound closeness, challenges emerged. Rumors started circulating around campus, whispers about us that reached our ears despite our attempts to remain discreet. The tension escalated when one of our classmates made an offhand comment during a group study session, hinting at what they thought was going on between us. I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach, fear creeping back. "Ethan," I whispered, glancing at him. "Do you think people are starting to notice?" He took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Let them notice," he said firmly. "We don't have to hide. Not if it's real." And it is. It's real. That's what matters. His words gave me courage, and I realized that we had reached a point where we could face the world together, despite the potential judgment and challenges. The connection between us was too strong to be diminished by rumors or fear. Later that night, back in our dorm room, we held each other close, the weight of the day melting away in the warmth of our embrace. "I'm glad we're," Ethan whispered, resting his forehead against mine. "Me too," I replied softly, tracing his jaw with my fingers. "I wouldn't trade this for anything." And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the soft glow of our lamps and the comfort of our shared space, I realized that the journey we had embarked on, full of uncertainty, tension, and desire, had led us to something profound, something worth fighting for, something real. The following weeks were a delicate dance of balance. We continued to explore our relationship, navigating the complexities of college life, social pressures, and our own insecurities. But with every challenge, we grew closer, learning to support and understand each other in ways that went beyond surface-level affection. One evening, as we walked across campus under the soft glow of streetlights, Ethan slipped his hand into mine. The simple gesture spoke volumes, a quiet affirmation that we were in this together, no matter what. "You know," he said softly, glancing at me, "I used to think love was supposed to be easy." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Me too. Turns out," he continued, "it's not about being easy. It's about being worth it." I nodded, heart swelling. "And you're worth it." Ethan smiled, leaning closer to brush his lips against mine in a soft, lingering kiss. "So are you," he whispered. For the first time, the chaos of the world seemed distant, irrelevant. There was only us, our connection, our love, messy, complicated, imperfect, and completely worth it. The semester was drawing to a close, and with it came a quiet sense of reflection. Ethan and I had weathered the storms of rumors, insecurities, and the delicate dance of early intimacy, and what remained was something stronger, more resilient. We had discovered the beauty of honesty, the power of trust, and the intoxicating pull of a love that had been forged through shared vulnerability. One Saturday morning, the dorm was unusually calm. I woke to sunlight filtering through the curtains, and for a moment, I felt the lingering traces of a dream. But when I turned slightly, I saw Ethan still asleep beside me, the soft rise and fall of his chest a comforting rhythm that reminded me how far we had come. My heart swelled with warmth, and I reached out, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "Morning," I whispered softly, and he stirred, blinking up at me with a sleepy grin. "Morning," he murmured, stretching lazily, his arm draping over me. The intimacy of that simple moment felt sacred. We didn't need grand gestures or declarations, just the quiet knowledge that we were here for each other, completely and unconditionally. Breakfast was simple, shared at the small kitchen table in silence, punctuated by occasional smiles and playful nudges. The world outside could wait. Right now, there was only this, the calm, comforting rhythm of togetherness. After breakfast, we decided to take a walk across campus, the autumn leaves crunching under our feet, painting the pathways in gold and crimson. It was a rare moment of leisure, unhurried and free, and I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known I needed. You know, Ethan began, glancing at me. I never thought college would be like this. I raised an eyebrow. Like what? Like finding someone who just gets me. He said softly. Someone who sees me, flaws and all, and still wants to be here. I squeezed his hand, feeling the connection between us tighten. I think we found that in each other, I said, smiling. He nodded, leaning closer, his shoulder brushing mine. Yeah, we really did. As we walked, we passed familiar spots, the benches where we had studied, the library steps where we had shared secret conversations, the quiet corners where our hands had first intertwined. Each memory carried a weight, a reminder of the journey we had taken together, of the obstacles we had faced, and of the intimacy that had grown quietly, persistently, between us. By the time we returned to the dorm, the sunlight had shifted, casting long shadows across the hallways. We settled into our room, the comfortable familiarity of the space wrapping around us like a warm blanket. Ethan flopped onto his bed with a dramatic sigh, eyes closing briefly. You look tired, I said softly, moving to sit beside him. I am, he admitted, opening one eye to glance at me, a playful smile tugging at his lips. But in a good way. You've made this semester unforgettable. I laughed softly, the sound mingling with the quiet hum of the dorm. You too, I said. Unforgettable, in more ways than one. The evening brought a different kind of intimacy, a quiet closeness that didn't need words. We cooked dinner together, a simple pasta and salad, sharing laughter and teasing commentary as we worked side by side. There was a rhythm to our movements, a harmony that came from familiarity and affection. The small touche-san accidental brush of fingers. A hand resting on the small of the back carried a gentle charge, a silent acknowledgement of the bond we shared. After dinner, we sat on the couch, our legs tangled together, watching a movie we had picked at random. The film faded into the background as we whispered comments to each other, laughed quietly, and occasionally leaned closer, drawn together by gravity we no longer questioned. As the credits rolled, Ethan turned to me, eyes soft and serious. I want to tell you something, he said, voice low, intimate. I turned to face him, heart quickening. What is it? I love you, he said simply, the words falling into the quiet room like a gentle promise. I've loved you for a long time, and I don't ever want to pretend otherwise. My chest tightened, emotions flooding me in waves. I love you too, I whispered, the confession trembling on my lips. I have for a while, I just didn't know how to say it. Ethan smiled, relief and joy lighting up his features. He leaned in slowly, brushing his lips against mine in a soft, lingering kiss. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only this quiet, perfect moment, where two hearts acknowledged their love without hesitation or fear. We stayed entwined like that for what felt like hours, sharing whispers, laughter, and gentle touches, the depth of our connection growing with every passing second. There was no rush, no pressure, just the simple, profound knowledge that we had found something rare and precious. The days that followed were filled with small, beautiful rituals, Morning coffees shared in silence. Study sessions with fingers brushing. Late-night conversations that stretched until dawn. Every moment, ordinary in its own right, was imbued with meaning because it was shared, because it was ours. By the time the semester officially ended, we had developed a rhythm, a balance that allowed us to be ourselves fully and completely. We celebrated the end of finals with quiet joy, wandering the campus hand in hand, laughing and teasing, savoring the sweetness of freedom and the security of each other's presence. One evening, as the campus emptied and the streets glowed under the soft illumination of streetlights, we found ourselves sitting on a familiar bench, the one where our hands had first brushed in quiet anticipation weeks ago. "You remember this place?" I asked softly, leaning against him. He smiled, eyes reflecting the soft glow of the lamps. "Of course I do. Feels like a lifetime ago." "It does," I agreed. "And yet, here we are, still together, still." Ethan reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "Always," he said simply. "No matter what comes next, it's real, and it's worth everything." I felt a lump in my throat, overwhelmed by the simplicity and honesty of his words. "Always," I echoed, resting my head against his shoulder. The months that followed were marked by the same quiet joy, the same steady growth of intimacy and trust. We faced challenges, of course rumors, insecurities, the occasional clash of personalities, but we faced them together, leaning on each other, supporting one another in ways that only deepened our connection. One evening, as we packed up to leave the dorm for winter break, Ethan pulled me aside, a small box in his hand. "I got this for you," he said softly, offering it with a shy smile. I opened it carefully, revealing a delicate bracelet, simple but elegant, with a small charm that seemed to capture a memory we both cherished. "Ethan, it's beautiful," I whispered, touched beyond words. He shrugged, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. "Not as beautiful as you," he said softly, and I laughed, feeling the warmth of love and affection radiate between us. As we left the dorm, hand in hand, the crisp winter air biting gently at our cheeks, I realized something profound. The Seuss was no longer tentative, uncertain, or fragile. It was strong, resilient, and undeniable, and it was ours. Standing at the campus gates, watching the last buses depart and the quiet streets stretch into the night, Ethan turned to me, eyes shining with quiet intensity. "No matter where we go, no matter what happens, promise me we'll always." I smiled, squeezing his hand tightly. "Always," I said firmly, my heart full. He leaned in, brushing his lips softly against mine in a kiss that carried months of longing, fear, and hope, now fully realized. The world felt infinite in that moment, possibilities endless, hearts entwined, and love undeniable. The winter break passed in a blur of joy, family gatherings, quiet nights together, and endless conversations that deepened our understanding of each other. We returned to campus in the new semester, hand in hand, ready to face whatever challenges awaited, secure in the knowledge that we were no longer just roommates, no longer just friends, were partners, confidants, and lovers, united by trust, affection, and an unshakable bond. By the time spring arrived, the campus was alive with new energy, and so were we. Our relationship had matured, growing stronger with every shared smile, every whispered secret, every gentle touch. The flirtations and teasing of early days had evolved into a steady, confident intimacy, a knowledge that we could rely on each other in ways words could not fully capture. One evening, as we walked across the campus lawns under a sky painted with the soft hues of sunset, Ethan stopped, turning to face me fully. "I've been thinking," he said, voice low, intimate, "about how lucky I am. To have you. To have this." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, overwhelmed by the beauty and sincerity in his words. "I feel the same," I whispered, "more than I ever thought I could." He smiled, lifting my hand to his lips in a gentle kiss. "Then let's promise," he said softly, "to never take this for granted. To always be honest. To always care. To always." I nodded, heart full, eyes shining. "I promise," I said firmly, and in that quiet, perfect moment, surrounded by the soft glow of sunset and the promise of countless tomorrows, I realized that we had come so far from hesitant roommates with unspoken glances to partners in every sense of the word. We had faced fear, uncertainty, and the messy complexities of life, and what remained was something pure, real, and beautiful. Ethan pulled me close, resting his forehead against mine. "I love you," he whispered, the word simple and yet carrying the weight of everything we had shared. "I love you too," I replied, smiling through tears, the warmth of his presence filling me completely. And as we stood there, hands intertwined, hearts beating in unison, I knew without a doubt that this love, this connection, this journey was only the beginning. Together, we could face anything. Together, we were unstoppable. The promise of being just roommates was long gone, replaced by something infinitely richer, infinitely deeper, and infinitely more beautiful. We had found each other. We had found love. And we had found home in each other's hearts. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.